Welcome back, everyone. It's been a long time and I was really busy these days working on a lot of different projects. So I couldn't just get the time to create these videos. But I'm back now and I'm happy to say that from now on we are going to be starting off with our new series, which is based on Mesh. We are going to be talking about what Mesh is, how we can use it, what are different type of nodes, and how you can create your own motion graphics. So today is going to be introduction to Mesh. What are the basics of Mesh? How you can understand and get yourself started with creating your own motion design. So let's quickly get started. First off, I want to talk about what Mesh is. Mesh is a procedural node-based motion graphics network, which allows you to create procedural animation, or you can say procedural motion graphics. So it's a quite interesting tool in Maya to play around with different types of motion graphics and animation, and we are going to be taking a look at all the node it is consistent of. So the first things first, I'm going to show you how to load up your Mesh. So by default, if your Mesh is not loaded up here, what you can do is go to Windows and setting in preferences, plugin manager, and you can just scroll down here and you should see something called as mesh.mll. Just make sure it is set to load it and set it to auto load, and that's it. You'll have the access to this Mesh network. All right, so let's talk about what Mesh is, how we can use this. So Mesh requires some kind of geometry to work with. It requires something to pull out of instancing. So I'm going to start off by taking a simple cube. And if we were to traditionally instance this or replicate this, what we'll usually do is hit Ctrl D and just move it along, and then probably hit Shift D to repeat the same command. But again, there is not a lot of different control with it, and then there is no possible way of controlling each of them in a unique way. Or you can say that if I move this, we can move them all at once, we can scale them, but not in a random way or procedural way, you can say. It adds and takes a lot of space and runtime in our viewport. So let's quickly fix this. All right, so we have a cube. Now go to Mesh network and you can click on Mesh. So this is Mesh. Once you click it, you have started your Mesh network. So the first node that we are going to be talking about is the distribute node, which is by default applied when you click on Mesh. All right, so as you can see, distribute node is just an instancer node. So one more thing you'll notice is that you get this Mesh repro mesh, which is basically our replications or instancing, and the Mesh network itself in the outliner. If you don't have the outliner, you can go to Windows and outliner. All right, the other thing you'll notice in the attribute editor is that we have the whole network here, which is we call the Mesh waiter. And this is pretty much all there is to Mesh. All these nodes are, which is compiled of how you can use different type of nodes to create different type of motion graphics. And we are going to be talking about all of them in future videos. But today it's all about distribute, the first node in our procedural system. And as you guys can see, the first node that we have is distribute. It's distributing our number of geometries, and we can specify how much we want the geometry to be instancing. Let's say you want to have 10, 20, 100, and if you want to exceed 100, you can. There is no limitation, and so on and so forth. All right, so I'm going to keep it to, let's say 10. Right, we can keep it to 10. And then you have the distribute type, which is set to linear, and this is one of the most important thing in the distribute. This is where we get most of our control. But before getting into it, I'm just going to talk about some basic stuff. The basic stuff is you want to turn off or turn on, you have this little switch, which is pretty nice. And if you want to delete this entire node, you can click on delete. I'm not going to delete this, but yes, you can. Then you have the repro, which is your basically what you're instancing. You can click on use GPU if you want to use your GPU. The other thing is right now what you're seeing is geometry, which is your LOD, your level of detail. But if you're creating a lot of instancing, like for example, you're creating a lot of stones or pebbles and you don't want to see them directly as a geometry itself, you can create a bounding box just so it's a bit not so heavy on your system. Right, so the other thing is you have a lot of different parameters for changing everything. So let's quickly get into this, and once we understand this, we can start messing around with our types. So the first thing that we have is the distribute X, Y, and Z. You can pretty much move them around on all the axes. There you go. All right, so you want to create a lot of steps. All right, you can create them. The good and very interesting thing that you'll notice about mesh is once you click on mesh, it creates a replication of your object, and it also hides your original object, which you can notice that it's completely grayed out in our outline. If I click on my cube and go to pcube display, you'll notice that the visibility has been turned off. Now if you want to bring out the visibility, you can click on the visibility, or you can also do is, I'm going to just pull this out, Shift H. So there's a very nice neat little shortcut, Shift H, and if you want to hide something, H for the hide, or you can click on the visibility as well. So the interesting thing that we have in our mesh is, although this is dynamically all connected, if I scale this, you'll notice that our replicated objects are also changing how our stairs or our cube has been created. So this is a very nice control that we have. The object is always dynamically connected to our mesh network. So I'm going to hide this again. I think this is quite good, and I'm going to go back to mesh. I'm going to create more steps, maybe 12, and just reduce the amount of distance in our y-axis, and there you go. So you have very nice looking steps. You want to have more steps, you can create more steps, have more, you can see distance between them and so on. So this is quite nice that you have in your mesh. Now comes the rotation. You can play around with different kinds of rotation, and you can see how linear and beautiful the rotation is. You can play around with different type of twistings and abstract and architectural stuff if you want to create something with this, and so on. So yeah, you have rotation for all the axes. You can create something like this, and then you have the scale. Again, scale is another pretty nice thing that you have. You can create a variation where the objects are pretty much growing from a very small instance. So you can have maybe like a 5 or yeah, and there you go. So you can have something like that looks like this. We can just create a little bit of rotation in this, yeah, and now you have a very nice looking abstract structure. The good thing is it's all procedural, all right? And then you have the strength. If you want to change the position, rotation, you don't want to like change any of that position, or you just want to change the scale, you can do that by selecting only scale. All right, you can go back and you can change pretty much everything. If you want to like you think the animation is looking good, you think the overall geometry is looking good, it's too much, you want to tone it down, you can use the strength. And then you also have the option to randomize it. And then you have the step strength, which pretty much stepwise, you'll learn more about this in future videos. And then you have the ramp, where you can pretty much also control the same thing in different interpolation. You can set it to smooth. You want to create a different variations, you can do that, and so on. We are going to be talking about this in later on videos. So this is what distribute is. Now let's say if you have your own some default setting, or you want to create something that always create that same network, or you want to set it to default, what you can also do is you can simply go to mesh, right, and you have this distribute. You can change any parameter that you want, and let's say you want to go in here, you want to create this, and you can also create your own preset from in here. Or you want to maybe try something different. You want to have a default preset loaded directly into your mesh when you click on mesh. What you can also do is you can go into animation and click on mesh, and when you create your mesh network, you can click on this setting, and here you'll notice that you have preloaded distribution type. You can set it to whatever you want, and you can click on instancer, or you want to create a mesh, and so on. And when you apply and close this, whenever you click on mesh, it's gonna create this network. So that is another way of creating a default mesh network. So there you go. So I usually like the distribute type, so I'm gonna just keep it like that only. So if you want to reset that, you can simply go to edit, reset settings, and apply and close. There you go. Now let's talk about the distribution type, the most interesting part in the distribution. So let's say if I have 12 number of copies or 12 number of instances, and what you want to do, you can also center distribution this if you want to just center them out completely. Let's say you want to change maybe how they look. You can set it to radial, All right, and this is radial looking instances. You can reduce the amount of radius. You can change the angle. You can animate this if you want, and then again the Z offset. All right. The interesting thing is you can change the axis, all right, where you want the whole instances to be. So let's say if you were creating like a panel or maybe something like that, let's create something like this, and let me just create something. Okay, so this is our sci-fi panel, something like this. All right, there you go. So what you can do is you can click on the mesh, all right, and you can set it to radial, and then you can create pretty much a lot of different panels with it. And there you go, you can change the direction of it. So you can create a lot of instances using this. So it'll help you with your modeling stuff if you're creating a lot of spaceship or something like that, where it is consistent of a lot of cubes or geometry. You can create one geometry and then you can just replicate it. All right, so back to distribution. So yeah, there are a lot of different axes. If you have a certain rotation going on, you can turn it off by clicking on calculate rotation. All right, the next thing is spherical, which is basically turns everything into a sphere. So if you have a lot of cubes and if you just increase the radius, you'll notice that it is pretty much the shape of a sphere. All right, you can change the angle of it if you want on both the axes. All right, so it looks something like this. Pretty nice looking if you want to create a animation that looks like a globe or something, or a planet, something like that. It can be used. The next thing that you have is the mesh, and this is one of my favorite actually. I'm gonna quickly demonstrate this. So let's maybe take a cylinder. All right, or let's maybe take a sphere. Let's take a sphere and let's say I want to place a small spheres on top of these. All right, or let's say I have some crystals going on, and let's quickly, I have these and I want to clone on top of this sphere. What I can do is click on the mesh and I can set it to mesh. Now what you want to do from here is you want to input the mesh which you want the instances to be replicated on. So you have the sphere. Now you want to middle mouse click on top of the sphere and drop it onto the input mesh, and there you go. So now you have replicated those crystals on top of this mesh. Now again, as I said, this is a completely procedural system, so you can always change your sphere size and everything. You can change the crystal and you can go to mesh and you can increase the amount of clones you have. But this is not the interesting part about the mesh. The interesting part is you can change the method of it. So you can set it to vertices, all right, how many vertices you want, and as you can see, it's not filling up the whole vertice, all right, only the bottom part. So what you can do is click on flood mesh and it will fill the whole thing up, and there you go. So again, you can select a random vertices or face center. It will just clone on right on the center of the face, and then voxels, which is pretty much on the inside. If I just x-ray this, and then or if you want, you can clone it on top of the edges, and you can actually also scale this up. If you want to change the scaling, you can also scale this up, and there you go. So this is the most powerful method in the mesh system that I believe it's really powerful. You can set it to UV spaces, you can set it to random edges, and you can pretty much choose how much clone you want, and so on. You can also choose the scaling, so you don't have to go back to your original object and change the scale again and again. And if you are playing with voxel, if you do have the voxel selected, you can play with the voxel size and so on. So that is pretty interesting thing. So yeah, more to in future videos, but this is just a basic to give you the idea what is possible with distribute. All right, let's start over there. So the next thing that we have is the in position PP, which is directly connected to our particle system. And I'm going to quickly demonstrate how this works. You don't actually have to select the in position per particle. You can just select pretty much anything that you want. And I want to thank Dan for this, who came up with this whole idea. So let's say if I have a sphere, all right, and I'm just gonna set it to spherical. All right, seems good. Let's maybe keep it to something like this. All right, and what I want to do here is I'm gonna go to my fx, and in my end particle, usually what we do is create end particle, but we want to create a particle that are in the center of our grid, and we have all the particle in one position. So for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my end particle tool, and in the end particle tool, I'm gonna click on the settings and make sure you have the number of particles set to 50. You can do the same. You can go to mesh and maybe set it to 50 as well. All right. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click on my grid, and in the center of the grid, I'm just gonna click one time and hit enter. So this whole particle is 50 particles combined in one. All right. So it's really hard to see, but those are 50 particles. All right. If I play this, you'll start to see all of them fall at once. So what we want to do is we want to change the position of their particles, and we want to change the position with this mesh system. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to dynamic properties, and I'm going to ignore solver gravity. And the second thing I'm going to do is go to shading and change the sphere to a 0.2 sphere. There you go. So we have sphere falling. Actually, it's not going to fall since we have turned on the ignore solver gravity. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go to the per particle array, and in the position, as you can see, we have the default position, which is in the center of the grid. I'm going to right click in here and click on runtime expression before dynamics. In here, what we are going to do is input the value that we have in the mesh. So if I click on mesh, and you'll notice that we have in position this particular name, which is representing what we are going to be doing. And that is, we are going to be taking the end particle data and we are going to be transferring onto the mesh, the mesh that we have in here. So a couple of things to keep in mind. The first thing is this name, which is exactly as it is in position per particle pp. We have to keep this name in mind. So when you go back in here and click on runtime expression, you want to copy this whole thing and paste in here, and equals to space again, and type in mesh as it is in here. As you can see, we have mesh and 1. So I'm going to type in 1 and then full stop and in position pp and exclamation. Semicolon, my bad. Semicolon, and click on create, and that's it. So if you'll notice that I'm going to just click on play, we have replicated our particles on top of our mesh. So if I were to animate this in some other ways, you'll notice that we have the particle inside of our mesh network. So this is how you use the in position pp, which is directly connected to our end particle. So this was just to give you the idea. Obviously we are going to be using it in our future videos, but this is just to give you the scratch idea how you can use it if you want to use it. Anyways, moving on. So let's click on mesh, and the next thing that we have is the grid. Pretty useful if you want to create a lot of grid or instancer in just one mesh. So you can choose how many grid you want, how many clones you want in which axis, and then you can obviously distribute them along the axis. So you have this looking grid. Again, you can center distribution this if you want, and it has the same properties as the linear and radial. Nothing much in this as well, but it is pretty nice. You can create more applications easier if you are creating a lot of books or you have something with a lot of instancing. Anyways, then we have the initial state, which is basically the initial state of your position. Like for example, let me just turn on the grid for this. So if I have this and if I set my cube in here, you'll notice that when I click on mesh, it resets and goes everything in the center. You can click on the initial state and it will bring back the initial state. We can attach a transform in here, which is for the future videos, but yeah, it is for creating your own instance where you want them to be position wise. The next thing that we have is the paint effect, another pretty interesting thing. So how this works is if you create something, let's quickly go to our let me see, where is it, content browser, and you'll notice that we have a lot of paint effects in here. For example, if I go to flowers and I'm going to click on any flower that you like and just draw one flower. All right. If you want to scale this up, hit B on your keyboard and left click and drag and just paint it. So you'll notice that we have a very nice looking plant in here. And I'm going to go to my mesh again, middle mouse click and drop it onto our mesh. And there you go. So now you have clones on top of your paint effect. I'm just going to reduce the scale value of our cubes just so it's easier for us to manage. Go to mesh again. And here you can increase the amount of cubes you have. But one thing you'll notice that we have only main checked on, so it's not actually cloning on top of our leaves. So you can click on leaves and flowers as well, and then flood mesh to flood the whole thing. And if you just uncheck the flowers, you'll notice that it's not replicating on top of flowers. If you check off the leaf, it won't be replicating on the leaf as well. So this is why these options, and again you can change the scaling if you want to do some scaling or so on. You want to have manual. See, flood mesh is going to flood the whole thing. That means a clone on top of the entire geometry. But if you don't want that, you want your own control of how many points it should be, then you can turn it off. And there you go. So if you're working with paint effect, you're creating some strokes or anything like that, you can use this type of distribution type. Moving on. The next thing that we have is the volume. Let me just get rid of everything here. All right. And let's click on volume. Volume is exactly as it states. It's basically your geometry combined inside of a volume. Now here the volume is particularly cube. You can change it to point, having a singular point, and you can also choose it to be sphere. You can increase the number of points. You can change the volume size. But the shape will always depend on the shape you have selected in here. And so it looks something like this. All right. So this is what our first node was all about. This is distribution node, our default and first node in mesh. And we are going to be talking about all of these nodes one by one. So have fun with it. Just try different distribution type. Just take a cube, get inside of distribution, just play around with it. It doesn't have to be something that you have to create. Just dabble around, just play and just experiment on, try to create something out of it, or like just play around with it, have fun, explore what are the options, what you can do, what not, and with it. And once you get the idea, then we can get started with creating something interesting looking motion graphics with it. Anyways, this I hope this helps. It has been a long time. I was really busy and in middle of a lot of different projects, couldn't find the time, but I'm really excited about this new series. So have fun, enjoy your first node, and I'll see you in the next video.